Right on. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, Brian.
So, this is Dave Anderson, local legend, high school football star, help Winlock win the championship back in '84 or was it '85?
Actually, I need to correct the record on that because um, I played as a junior, um, and I played the line. And as you know, I was one of the fastest kids in the school. I played
You
track,
were track. Oh yeah.
and I did not have very much fun playing the line. I wanted to run, so I didn't play my senior year. I really should have, but I didn't. But yeah, it's neither here nor there. Water under the bridge.
Man.
If I'm not having fun doing something, then I'm doing something wrong, or I should be doing something else.
Well, at
So,
least at least you were doing it for the right reasons. I only joined so that I could hopefully date cheerleaders. So that was
oh my
I
gosh,
had an
you're
entirely
not the
different.
only one.
Yeah, I had a totally different reason for
Mm.
playing football. But I will say there was a lot of those young men in your class that were very dedicated to the sport. There were several of them that played hard, partied hard, went on to have some pretty exceptional lives. Now, I didn't see you for a few years after high school until you were working in, I believe it was the Rite Aid or ShopRite there at the mall. When Lewis County
Oh
used
my
to have a
gosh,
mall,
that's so far back. That was that was Payless, not the shoe store, but Payless drugstore.
yes,
Yes,
that was
a couple of years while I was going through college.
man.
Yeah.
Now, when did you enlist and get into the army?
Um, that would have been in '89. Um,
So
but
pretty.
you know what? Before we get into all of that, I for those watching, I want to make sure that if you're just fresh to the army, or if you've been in the army a while, there's something very important that you need to know, and there's three very dangerous things that you never want to hear. One of them is a lieutenant that says it's been my experience, a captain that says I've been thinking, and a warrant officer that says watch this. So, with that being said, it was November 17th, 1989, when I enlisted. Now, I had to go through basic training, and I went through as a PFC because I had college. As soon as I graduated boot camp, I was promoted automatically to an E5 because in order to go to flight school, you had to be an E5. So I went from E3 to E5 immediately. I got to sew on the rank, which immediately, about a week later, I had to take and unsew that
Oh,
off because I became a warrant officer candidate.
wow.
So I was a sergeant I was paid as an E5 all the way through flight school. Back then, you had to graduate flight school, then you got your commission as a warrant officer, then they gave you your wings because they wanted to make sure that they had you by the short hairs so that you didn't just go through flight school, get your certification with your wings, and then go okay, goodbye, and then go do civilian stuff.
Now, those of you who don't know, a warrant officer is very specialized. Um, they're the unicorn of the armed services. So maybe some of you watching this right now, maybe some of you have been 20 years in the military and have never seen a warrant officer. This is what one looks like. Uh,
A younger version.
Younger, yeah, they'll look like this, but maybe have black hair, maybe.
Yeah.
But that's questionable, especially in the pilots.
Yeah.
That's a
So Army version is much different warrant officer than any other. Um, and I don't know how many part series you're going to make on this because we could talk for hours. Because I knew Brian when what were you, 8th grade or something like that is when we first met.
I was a sophomore when I
So,
came to the Big Ten
sophomore,
lineup.
okay.
Yep. I looked like an
He
eighth
looked like
grader.
an 8th
I
grader.
was very small.
Very small. But yeah, so we've known each other a long time. So I digress. So you asked the what
When you came in, what year
okay,
you came in? So '89, you made it.
89. Yep, a year and a half basically through flight school.
How did you know flight school was for you? I mean, that was the what drove you to that?
Well, the weird thing was, is I was talking to the neighbor who's basically kind of like my adopted mom, even though I didn't have any issues with my mom or dad. My dad wasn't around for quite a bit; he was in the Air Force. Um, but just down the hill from where I live, the Hortons, and
Oh,
I talked to them, and they were like, you know, Andy, because they called me Andy. It's my last name, Anderson. So they said, Andy, you ought to think about being an airline pilot. And I'm like, you know what? That's a really good idea. I mean, hey, we're from a small town. Normally, folks in small towns, you don't think like that. And that's I think one of our biggest problems is you just don't think of what you could be. You're just small town. So what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to do what everybody else in the small town is doing, and that's what you do. So God bless her for making me think outside the box and think higher than what that I was normally thinking I was going to achieve.
I
So that started it way back when. That's when I was going through school. In college, I was going for my um, aeronautical or aerospace engineering degree. Ran out of money, and my dad was, "Hey, I'm retiring, so you need to do something."
figured that out. It's a
So my brother-in-law, who was a warrant officer, but if you know the military, know the army, he was a walking warrant. Now he was a flying warrant, but then he got hurt and he became a walking warrant, and he was in counterintelligence. Very smart guy, very smart cookie. He says, "What do you think about flight school?" And that initial conversation with Mrs. Horton and the conversation I had with him is, I was like, you know what, that sounds pretty good. What do you got to do? Well, you know, they'll take you high school to flight school. I'm like, well, I have a college degree. You know, I'm at least an associate by then. I didn't have my bachelor. And so I applied. The recruiter basically just kind of chuckled. He had never had a warrant officer come through. He's like, "Oh yeah, take the ASFAB and then we'll talk about it, kid." You know, whatever. And I smoked the ASFAB. I'd gotten like 99 or 98 or something on almost every section. I was taking speed reading, all that stuff in college. So he's like, "Oh, I'd never done a package before. This will be cool." So he started, and he was a great recruiter. I'm going to say one of the best because he actually saw a challenge where some recruiters will be like kind of lazy and not want. I'm sorry if you're a recruiter, and I don't mean everybody's like this, but he was exceptional because he had never had one before. And if you're a recruiter, you know that as soon as you put one through and they get accepted, now you have a billet that you have to fill that next year to have a warrant officer. So once you get one, the Army thinks that you're going to get one every year. And then maybe next year they'll say, okay, now have to get two. Okay, so this was a big step. I went through all of that kind of stuff, took my fast test and all that, and of course, passed all that. Took my flight physical, passed all that. Um, that kind of brought me to that point of going in, and that's why I kind of chose that path before I went to basic training, as most people do. They'll have that dream job or whatever they call it. If you pass, but your basic training, then you go to AIT. Well, flight school was my AIT. So
Now you flew what helicopters or helicopter did you fly?
they started us off on Hueys. So I had about 60
Wow.
hours in a Huey. So that was fun. That was my learning experience, learning how to hover. I was in a field, a gigantic field, and just gave me one set of controls at a time, and I was all over that field. I used up every bit of it, you know, everywhere. And then pretty soon, I got the hover button, and and all was well. Went through all the basics and passed all my check rides. Went into instrument training, passed all those check rides. Um, so yeah, and then back then it was you had a choice of aircraft. Which one did you want to go into? And at that time, I was thinking, well, I'm just here to get some training so that I can get out on the civilian side because I'm not going to stay in the military. all my life. What the heck? Get out on the civilian side. So I picked an aircraft that I thought would be commensurate with that. That would be the OH-58 Alpha Charlie. Back then, they don't even have those anymore. Um, so I did that, and that was a good course to go to because it was not an advanced aircraft, but I mean control touch. It was purely hydraulics. There was no flight control system that was helping you. And because it was not an advanced aircraft, they made it really hard in a lot of other kind of ways, like threat identification and all this sneaking around and snooping and pooping with the aircraft, and which helped me later on because one of my first duty assignments was the Cav. So I had a Cobra. As two Cobras normally followed a scout aircraft, and I figured I was there like my 6 gun shooters in my pocket. I would tell them, "Hey, I got an enemy," and they would just mow it down. So they were like pulling out a gun and mowing stuff down. It was a lot of fun to be like in that kind of command. You're like an air mission commander for those 3 aircraft. You're telling them what to do. You're maintaining your navigation. You're doing all the things to keep them safe. They're doing things to keep you safe. And our motto was that Scout aircraft was um, mark the target with a burning aircraft because we were unarmed and unafraid. We were armed because we had the AH-1s behind us, but we were the first ones out in the front.
I I came into aviation later, probably I want to say 2006, and so the we still had the Scout, but the Huey and the Cobra were gone. But they were still two of the first aircraft I got to fuel, and it was fueling our old ones that the Japanese Army that we had sold them. And the amazing thing with the Japanese, when they refurbish our products, they look brand new out of the package. I mean, these vehicles were in immaculate shape compared to what some older Army vehicles typically look like, especially if we hang on to them. So I was with Counter Drug, and we used the Scouts, the OH-58s, which leads me to my next question: was you were part of Counter Drug? How did that come about? How did you get involved with that?
Oh, that's a good question. A little bit of a long story, but hey, we got time, right? Um, so I was flying OH-58s. I went back to flight school and I was teaching. I was teaching combat skills, advanced combat skills, contact, and then they said, "Hey, we need some night pilots." I'm like, "Man, I don't have much time. Maybe 135 night vision goggle hours. You got more than anybody else around here, so you're going to nights." So I went up there to nights. Um, so I was teaching nights for a long, long time, 6.5 years, 3,500 hours or something like that when I was finished with flight school. But during that time, I had I was looking for um, an opportunity to get promoted because they were not promoting you if you did not have an advanced aircraft, which 58 was not an advanced aircraft, and it did not matter that I was the instructor pilot of the year.
Wow.
And the very next time I was going to have to get out because I didn't have an advanced aircraft. Well, I had actually gotten orders to go to the Black Hawk course and the IFE course. And my battalion took both those away from me because, oh, we have a student bubble at Fort Rucker. We need to get these students through. We'll get you that course later. Yeah, basically what they did is they gave that course to some drinking buddies, and that course disappeared. Now, I still had those RFOs, request for order. And I took those request for orders all the way up to the general of Fort Rucker. And I said, "This is what the battalion took away from me. This is why I can't get promoted." "Well, we'll see what we could do." I says, "Sir, hey, I'm just a W-2. Are you saying that you're just going to let me slip through the cracks and I'm screwed? I'm not going to be able to stay in the Army. No, no, that's not what I'm saying. Okay, because I put it to him. I wasn't scared. And next thing I know, I'm getting an Apache transition. My company commander calls me. He says, "Hey, Dave, I got 2 questions for you." Yeah, yeah, what's going on? And granted, this is like at 4 p.m. I'm due to come in to fly nights at like 6:30 that in the evening. Start anyway. Got 2 questions for you. Well, do you want an Apache transition? I'm like, what? Where the hell did that come from? I don't know what you're talking about. No, well, do you want Apache transition? No, I'm not. What's your other question? Well, do you want to fly your students tonight? I'm like, well, of course I'm flying my students tonight. And he says, do you want an Apache transition? Of course, the light went off. I know this is a long story to get to your question. A light went off. This is what they're offering. And I either take it or leave it. This is my advanced aircraft. So I'm like, son of a pup. And I says, that's all they're gonna offer me, right? And he's like, yeah, yeah. I'm like, okay, I'll take it. He says, are you gonna fly your students tonight? I'm like, well, what does that have to do with anything? He says, well, the course starts tomorrow. I'm
Ooh.
like, this so to put this into perspective, the Apache Dash 10 operators manual is that thick. You can imagine with twin engines, twin nose cone stuff,
And obnoxious to fuel.
all the limitations, all the emergency procedures, all the notes, cautions, warnings. I'm going into it absolutely dry. So I'm like, no, I'm not flying my students tonight. They're on their own. Sorry about that. Tell them, good luck and whatnot. I show up the next day, and there was like 4 students. One or two of them, were my students that I had just had through nights. They had graduated, and others were kids that I had in my class. I was a platform instructor while I was teaching. One of the instructors has to go up and teach the classes, and then you go to your table afterwards, and then you take your students out flying. So they're like, "What are you doing here?" I says, "I am your classmate." They're like, "No way!" So
Wow.
so here I am in the Apache course. I hated the Apache. Well, the Apache was a fun aircraft to fly. Some of the people, God love them. We need to have people like this in wars, in conflicts, this kind of stuff.
Rougher group. Rougher group.
Well, do you know how you'll know an Apache pilot is at your party?
Hmm.
He'll
He'll
tell
tell
you.
you.
He'll
Yeah.
tell you. Yeah, yeah. Same reason he uses his birth control, his personality. So, um, so so I finish up the Apache course, and I never flew an hour of Apache after that because, lo and behold, there was a material error in my packet, and they passed me over for promotion, which made me not eligible for promotion. I was um, whatever they flagged for promotion, because if you get passed over twice, you're out. They don't want to spend all that money on somebody who could get passed over the second time. So while I put in for material error, which takes a year, by that time I would be almost out because you stay for a year. I decided that I needed to find a new home. So I started looking around for National Guard units that did not fly Apache, that flew something else. And I found one in Mississippi, National Guard,
Did
and
not.
I flew Chinooks. So I said, I'll join. They said, great, love to have you. You're in the Chinook course. I was like, sweet. I loved flying a Chinook. I had
I
is
have a
this a family?
personal.
This is a family show, so I can't really say this, but I I was aroused every time I flew a
There's a
Chinook. They
lot
are
of soldiers watch this.
yeah,
They're gonna get it. They
they are
know. They know.
amazing. I've never seen the earth disappear under my feet so fast ever. I mean, straight up. Anyway, I digress. I'm getting to how I became the counter drug. So I got that transition. Of course, it was out in Mississippi. I had a heck of a time trying to get out there to make AFTPs. They had a simulator right there at Fort Rucker, but they never would let me go in and use it. The company wouldn't. They said, no, you're not going to use it. You got to come out here. I'm like, well, it's right here. I have to travel 4.5 hours to come out here for an AFTP. I've got young kids, a young wife with 2 young kids. I can't leave her all the time for this. And we only have one car. So I usually carpooled with somebody else. So she would have the car. Long story short, I stayed with them for 2 years. DES, you'll love this. DES, Department of Evaluations and Standards, came out and they were giving everybody check rides and tests and all this kind of stuff. And I got my test and everything else. I was RL3, readiness level 3. They gave me and another guy DES coins of excellence for the highest scores they'd ever seen on the testing.
You see that, boys and girls? You can grow up in a small town and accomplish something.
That same day,
Yeah.
that same day, I mean, I had an epiphany. I have to leave the guard. I can't keep coming out here. I'm not getting my hours. I'm gonna get, I can't make my hours. And here I was training. They'd given me a check ride. I just passed the check ride, no problem. I mean, easy, because I was flying, the little ones all the time. This big humongous thing, it had AFCS, it had flight control system, easiest thing in the world to fly. Even instruments, you can take your hands and feet off of it and turn the little dial to turn the aircraft turns by itself. I'm like, my gosh, this is the easiest thing I've ever flown.
And beautiful. There's just
Yeah,
something about them that
super
are just
fast. Yeah,
they're yeah. I can't. I'm. I think my audience knows I love the Chinook. So it's the first time I fueled one and the thing took 900 gallons. I was just 900 gallons in field artillery. That'll last you for a while. You can fill up a lot of big guns and Humvees with 900 gallons. First time I fueled 2 Chinooks and had to go get another truck, I was just, oh my god, this is
to put that in perspective, my aircraft took 71 gallons.
yeah. The
58,
the
71.
scouts, yeah.
And it would only fly for like 2.5 hours, both of them. So 900 versus 71. Fastest I've ever flown too. Oh my gosh, they're fast. 190 knots at treetop level, and my instructor let me do it. He's like, go ahead and go as fast as you want. You hard? I was going for it. Whew. It was amazing. Anyway, I digress. So got the Chinook. 2 years later, got that coin of excellence. The same day I turned in my resignation, because I was like, I saw the writing on the wall. I can't come out here and make the hours, and you're not giving them to me. So I resigned from that. At the same time, a friend of mine told me, "Hey, I'm punching out of here. I'm going to go to there's a counter drug opening in Nevada, in Las Vegas." He said, "You should apply for it." I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds like a good idea." They needed an instructor, number one, and they needed an IFE, number two. I was both. And I flew out to Nevada to apply, and I found out this is through the counter drug task force in Nevada. And they opened up a brand new facility. Well, okay, it's not really a facility; it was a hangar that they rented, civilian hangar. But they wanted to not just do counter drug in Reno, which is where the base was. They wanted to do it in Vegas, which was where the real action is, much closer. I-15 coming up all those drugs. So I applied, went out there, flew, and then they said, "Well, they're looking through my packet. Well, we really need a IFE." I'm like, "Well, you're in luck. I'm an IFE." I mean, everything that they were needing, I was just taking it off the table, and they were like, "This is the guy."
Right on.
So they hired me, and I came in there, and I was like,
That's a good sign, because sometimes when they start adding those, it's because, well, we already have somebody in mind. And was it? Did you have that feeling when you went there that
I
there
had
was?
a I had a feeling that hey, we're hiring an instructor. We want to be able to pass our check rides. We don't
Oh,
want
okay.
somebody with monstrous fangs. We want somebody who is fair and will teach and will not, because
Yeah.
you'll get instructors that they have a pocket full of zingers. Every instructor does. And they'll give you those zingers just to show you how stupid you are and how smart they are. And I always thought that that was a load of hogwash. I'm trying to be gentle to your audience. It was hogwash. And I was like, I am not going to do that. I'm going to train my soldiers, and they're going to know the information because I'm going to train them, and I'm going to do constant evaluations with them, constant training, ask them questions, but then also if they don't get it 100% correct, hey, add this, add this, add this. I'm not beating you up, but I want them to be perfect, as perfect as they can be. Not everybody's perfect. And that's what they were looking for, and they didn't know me. So, but I had all of the qualifications, everything that they wanted. So, long story short, they ended up hiring me. Um, I actually got released from the military. I was on my own for like 4 months, I think, and then I got picked up with the counter drug. Walked in, I was like, okay, where's the flight records? Well, I think so and so has them in their desk drawer over here. I'm like, okay, we'll cough them up. So it was literally starting from ground zero and then building this program. But we built that program so that, I mean, in the heyday, we were the first unit to do downlinking. So we had a camera on board that had a transmitter. That transmitter could be picked up by a receiver, and we were the first unit that got that downlinked video out over the internet. And I was the one that made that happen. I went to there was a 9-story building. The FBI had the top floor, and they had the same kinds of receivers that could receive the K band that we were transmitting. So they actually got our video down the elevator shaft. A cord went plugged into the city of Las Vegas, and once it got to the city of Las Vegas, then it could be transmitted to their EOCs. So for New Year's, I don't remember what year it was, must have been 2005 or so. For New Year's, all of the Las Vegas EOCs had the video that we were transmitting. So if there was a big situation, they could direct their police to better coordinate things.
Now, I want our audience to understand something, because when I went to school with him back in the 80s, none of this surprises me, because this young man at that time, I want to stress the young part, um, was making video game sprites on a Commodore 64 in
Oh
class.
yeah, I forgot
We
about
were
that.
so back in the 80s, we were fortunate to actually have some of the first computers in a school setting. But all the Franklin computers, which I think were kind of like knockoff Apple computers back in the day. I just remember that brand because that was the only one I really knew besides the Commodore. But a Commodore 64, which those who ever had a Nintendo 64, you understand the level of power that these things had. And he could make the little characters that would move around on a video game. He knew how to do that way back then. So all this high end technology, and especially working with the FBI and downloading information or transmitting information, I'm not surprised at all that you're telling me this. You you were one of those people I knew that would probably be doing something like that in your life.
So thank you for that. I forgot about that Commodore 64 thing. Um, so guys, spark chasers that are much uh, echelons above me um, took it from there. And then pretty soon, as a demonstration, we had video from Las Vegas. I had the FLIR, I had the FLIR controller, had a pilot. That video got sent to the president's desk. So this was a test. Now it took a full minute for it to go into the internet here in Las Vegas, travel all the way across the country with these different servers, because back then that's how it worked, to finally get onto his desk. And I remember this like it was yesterday. I was just playing with it, showing the scenery and whatnot. And in Las Vegas, which is cool. And I was like, oh, the Bellagio is going off. Went over to the Bellagio, the fountains and whatnot are going off the Bellagio. That's cool. I'll show that. About 50 seconds later, I got because we were also had a device on board that could transmit and receive cell phone through this special connection. We used a plumber's. It was weird. So a plumber had this facility that he would use this system to be able to get his plumbers to go to different houses, different addresses. So we asked if we could buy some time on that. And this thing, and so it transmitted right to the aircraft. Hey, could you show the Bellagio? That'd be cool. I was on it for 50 seconds. So he was at the White House calling and talking to me, and then 10 seconds later he had the Bellagio on his desktop.
Wow.
So, even though it took a minute, but I thought
Still,
that was kind of cool because
that was because in the old days, boys and girls, you used to have to hand crank the internet, and then we got to dial. About this time, we had
yeah,
dial up going.
yeah,
So that is awesome. Did you?
yeah.
So I've never even seen a president. The fact that you got to send like video information to the president, that's pretty outstanding.
Yep.
Now you get you're still training there, and I know this because my commander with Charlie 112, you actually trained my commander up here in Washington National Guard, uh, Colonel Johnson.
Oh yeah, yeah. He was Colonel Johnson was my student in flight school. And the funny thing about this, he is a character, by the way. That guy, he's funny. So I think I was flying with him. Yeah, it was him. It was him. And back in the day, I was flying during the daytime, so it was hot and whatnot. And we'd always stop at Troy, Alabama for refuel, and I never went in. Well, this time I had to go to the bathroom, so I'm like, okay, you take the controls, I'll go in. I had my Alcee vest on. I go trucking in there because I don't want to waste students' time. I go trucking in there. I'm like, oh, hot dog. Eat that down. And I'm like, oh, soda. And it's all free because they open it up to all the pilots to get you to come there and get refuel. They open up everything. Well, soda. And I put it in my Alcee vest. And I'm like, okay, I got to get back out. I zip back out to the aircraft and then flying his stick buddy. Here it goes, jiggling and it's warm and all this kind of stuff. And on our way back in, no, I'm sorry, it was his stick buddy that I left at the aircraft. I flew with Johnson that second flight, and we were out there flying. I'm making him do all these maneuvers, training him up. And we're on our way back in Northwest Corridor, and he's flying because he needs stick time. And I'm kind of deadheading it, looking around, whatever. And I feel this boom. And I'm like, holy crap, because there was in that area they have these circles, 1K avoidance circles, and it says shooter on it because somebody has come close to there and they've brandished a firearm, so they put on this hazards map, don't fly in this 1K circle. But we were on the route. That 1K circle was just over here. Some of them had 500-meter circles, whatever. It felt like we'd been hit with a round because I felt the overpressure, and I'm like, whoa! And I took the controls, and I'm like, did you feel that? And he's like, no, I didn't feel anything. I said, okay, check the instruments, make sure all the instruments are good. And I'm looking around, and he says, no, everything is fine. And he says, there's some droplets on the instruments. I'm like, what? He says, yeah, and it's coming from over your shoulder. And I look over my shoulder and hear all these clear droplets getting caught by the eddy effect, the wind flying over and landing on the dashboard. Ooh, I dove that thing down 3 times because I thought we were getting shot at, right? And I'm about ready to mash on that radio button. Mayday, 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 taking fire in the Northwest Corridor. I knew that was going to be like a whole shovel full of poop thrown into a fan. It would have hit and blew up everything. So I'm like, okay, I don't want to say that quite yet until I confirm. So I'm like, this clear fluid obviously is fuel, and we're gonna land. Gonna be a fireball. So I said, smell it. I wanted him to confirm, and he's like, click, click. He's trying to smell it, but he's on his shoulder harnesses. He can't. And I was like, oh my God. And I reached up there with my finger and I smelled it. And I'm like, well, this doesn't smell like fuel. It smells like sweet water. What the heck? And I'm like thinking. I'm like, ah, crud. And I says, okay, bring it back up to altitude. You have the controls. He's like, what's the matter? What's the matter? I'm like, I'll tell you when we get on the ground. So we get up, get in there, and here's this Sprite can that had been jostling all this time. And with the heat, it blew open like this. So the little lid was still kind of like this, hanging on it. But all of that had blown up, foamed over, dripped down, and the eddy was blowing it up over my shoulder. And I swear, I was so close to just taking fire in Northwest Corridor. Um, anyway, I told that story the next day, and I said, well, you guys have probably already heard this by now. This is to the instructor pilots, because we always do a instructor pilot brief before the students come in. And I got shot at in the Northwest Corridor. Oh, what happened? Yeah, taking rounds. So I told them the whole story, and then I brought the can out, and they all had a really good laugh over it. And then,
did you frame it?
so the students came in, and I got to tell that story to the students for the safety tip. The next thing I know, that damn can disappeared. I'm like, son of a gun, someone was thinking recycle. I was going to save that damn can because it had a story behind it. Somebody threw it away. Damn it. I looked at the recycle. I didn't see it in there. Dang, that sucks. And when they graduated, they presented me with a plaque with that can on it that said something like, you had their names on it. It said, thanks for all the training and the near-death experiences. I was like, you guys trolled me good. But yeah, he's a character. He was funny.
I got to do 2 different 3 month missions with counter drug. Saw it starting to eh, the ERAD part of it going to an end. When we legalized marijuana up here. But you had kind of a sadder. I mean, you were with it to the end of your career, and basically got to close the hangar door when they is. Am I? Do I remember that right, or is it?
Yeah, pretty much. There was a time when Congress was not passing budgets, and the whole Las Vegas unit was we were it was tenuous at best, because although we were getting thousands of flight hours and missions, real missions, taking hundreds of pounds. I can say this now because I'm not in the counter drug anymore. It doesn't, hopefully nobody's going to threaten my life or, that kind of thing. But we took tens of thousands of plants, doing marijuana eradication, um, cocaine, heroin, angel dust, methamphetamines, all tons of that stuff, billions. I remember one year when we counted everything up, we were somewhere around 5 point something billion taken off of the street. Most of that, the lion's share, was marijuana. When you find 100,000 plants, that does add up quite quickly. But we were taking a lot off the street, and but the money to keep our program going in Las Vegas, it was a plus up to our regular budget that was in stone. And because there was never a budget passed, that money disappeared. Because I was 18 and a half years in, I got to stay because I was at a stop loss. So I was the only one at the hangar. The guys that would come in would fly AFTPs. We weren't flying counter drug anymore because it needs two pilots, one to run the FLIR to maintain the target, and the other to fly. So that was like almost kiboshed. So I was running up aircraft, starting up the counter drug vehicles, and keeping the batteries charged. And if somebody came in for an AFTP, I went and flew with them. But it pretty much tanked after that. Um, After I retired, I did hear that there was a little bit of a resurgence, but it never really amounted to anything.
Got back to the point.
It never got back to the heyday of when we were doing over 1,000 missions a year.
Now, I always ask 9/11, where were you?
9/11. That's for every American. I think that should be a difficult subject to talk about. So I had that night. I'd gotten back from flying. It was around 2:30 in the morning, and I usually sleep till about 10. Um, I got up sometime around 9:30 or so. Came out. My wife had said, "Hey, there's an aircraft that went into the Twin Towers." I'm like, "You got to be kidding me! A big one?" Yeah. And just as I kind of came out, I remember they were seeing this other aircraft, and boom, right into the second one. I'm like, "We're under attack." And then of course the one in Pennsylvania, the one in Washington D.C. Um,
It is a recurring theme with soldiers that I've talked to. We almost all got that same. Somebody called us in to see the first tower, and we were all there to watch the second tower. It's just a strange.
well, my wife never woke me up.
Oh wow.
She was like, "Hey, he needs to sleep. You let him sleep." And then I woke up on my own and I came out. Um, so yeah, it was that, and then of course everybody got grounded. There wasn't an aircraft flying anywhere. We at Fort Rucker were the first ones up. I think it was maybe 3 days later that if you look at a map, you'll see all this buzzing around because all this training had to happen. We all got discrete squawk codes for our transponders, and it was tight control, but we were the first and only ones up flying for a couple of weeks, I think, until they finally started relaxing some things and getting security more in place and all this other kind of thing. But the training had to go on, and you could, if you looked at a map during that time, you'll see a whole bunch in southeast Alabama of all these little blips of 4,200 and something squawk code. I remember 42 something something. I don't remember the rest. But we were up flying, and we flew 7 days a week um, to not only catch back up for the days that we were out, but also because they wanted to push a lot more. When they thought that the war was going to kick off, they thought that we were going to be losing aircraft and soldiers dozens at a time. Fortunately, when all that kicked off, we just absolutely mopped the floor with our enemy. But they were thinking, yeah, this was going to be bad. So we were 7 days a week, and even our hours, we were limited to 4 hours a night. Safety factored time every 1 hour of goggles is worth 2 hours of day. Maximum fly during the day is 8. Maximum at night was 4. So they upped that to 4.5, and that kind of became the standard for me. Every night I was getting 4.5, 7 days a week. And then later on it was 6 days a week, and then finally we got back to the 5 days a week. We were pumping them through.
I'd always get those calls from friends and family, like when all the nighttime flying would be going on, and this wasn't just 9/11. This is like any time, and I said, no, nothing's going on in your backyard. It's just they got to get their hours. They got to get those training hours, and there's only so many places they can fly. So they're going to do what they can to get those hours and get them in check. It's really important.
So years after, a couple years after, flying there in Vegas and doing normal night flying, this cop thought that it was a aircraft out there training to do some kind of a bad thing in Las Vegas. And we were near his property, wasn't on his property. He come, and we're seeing him, night vision goggles. We see him coming, and no big deal. We're at a 50-foot hover, and we're doing a out of ground effect, OGE hover, for practice. And you do a 360. You got to keep it in a certain area and all that kind of thing. Maintain your altitude. And he spotlights us with night vision goggles. When you spotlight somebody, you practically blind you. So we both looked away, and we're flying like this, trying to look away from the spotlight. And I was like, that son of a gun. And he turns his overheads on, which red light is really bad. White light's really bad too, but red light's bad. So we're like, okay. So we took off from there, turned all of our lights off, went at blackout, went over this hill, and we come screaming down that hill as fast as we could, all blacked out, 100 knots, and we flew right over the top of him, maybe 5 feet over his car. And at that last second or two, maybe second, flipped on our landing light. Woof, right over the top. Basically, this get lost. We are doing what we need to do, get lost. This guy kept doing that. Turned out he really just wanted us to not be so noisy. But he said that, well, I thought these guys are out here doing nefarious things, training to attack Las Vegas. So for years after, there was this pins and needles kind of thing where people had were traumatized by it. And that's one thing terrorism does. As you know,
Yeah.
terrorism is done to a small population to try to terrorize the big population into doing something that you want them to do. Well, you want them to be afraid. You want them to be like the protests that are happening today, the pro Palestine protests and whatnot today. I don't know what they're protesting about, but they want to have that. They want to be those people to be in fear of, hey, you guys are doing this to us. We can do that to you again. So you need to be in fear of that. And it's very psychological.
It's I never worked with Army psyops, and I'm glad I was never part of that part of the world. But I know it's not too far disconnected from some of the work that you're probably involved in, and so or used to be involved in. Let me correct that on the record. Um, but it's I think it's one of those things for people. I try to share all the time. They always ask me what news source do you listen to, or what do you, and gotta be honest, there's a lot of folks on the left and the right that I will listen to their news station and try to figure out something in the middle
Yep.
of, not everybody on this side is wrong and not everybody on this side is right, but somewhere in between there's a truth, and it's like, hopefully we figure it out, and hopefully it keeps us from fighting each other. I think that's the thing that has I think that's the thing that in this time has bothered me the most. The other piece that we share on here is the faith part of God and
Mm.
country.
Yeah.
When did you come to faith, and how has your faith carried you through your military career, with the way that things are today, with the challenge of how things are today, and what do you tell soldiers who are, maybe they're not believers, maybe they're not, maybe they're still sitting on that fence. Where did you get your spiritual upbringing, or where did you how did you come to terms with God
Yeah.
through this process?
Yeah. So I'm an unapologetic Christian. Um, I believe in the Bible is 100% accurate and true. And as a person that um, does a lot of research, and when you're an instructor, you also there's a lot of psychology that's involved, especially with your students, to get them to train and get them to understand stuff and find where they are if they're about ready to give up because you've pushed them too hard. There's lots and lots of little differences and nuances. Um, I grew up Catholic, and I've since stepped away from that religion to pursue a relationship. I don't really claim I go to a Baptist church, but I don't claim any religion. I claim a relationship, and that is to me the biggest epiphany that I've had is that the relationship is much more important than any kind of religion. And if you don't have the relationship, then I can see where people can become hopeless and get caught into the snare of despair. And especially for those folks that have contemplated suicide, which, as you know, is pretty prevalent, unfortunately, with our brethren. I think it's because they've lost that hope, and there is so much hope in Jesus Christ. I and if you don't know that hope, it's so easy to get caught up with the devil's lies that you're no good, that you can't amount to anything, that you can't do X, Y, Z. When you know what, if you were just to say, because I truly believe this, that that we that we can hear Christ's voice. I'm not saying physically, but we understand that there's like this connection, and if you're having some kind of a bad issue, I would say that number one, learn to know the shepherd's voice, and when he is calling your name, say, "Here I am," because a lot of people will not say that. They won't say, "Here I am," so they get out and they're totally lost because they don't have a direction, they don't have a focus. And where did I focus? I focused my energies in Boy Scouts, teaching young people leadership. Military folks have those skills. We've been taught that. We have outdoor skills. We're not going to use it. We're just going to tuck that away. I mean, God gave us those skills. Why are we not using it for the greater good? Boy Scouts is a great place. You get to pass that on to some kid, make a difference in their life, affect his character. Why wouldn't you do that? And then later on, if the voice is still calling your name and you're still willing to say, "Here I am," like like being in church one day and feeling the absolute anxiety, like there was an active shooter about ready to start shooting people. That's the anxiety that I felt. I felt this one day, and I'm like, we got to get out of here. We got to get out of here. I'm looking around like I just have this overwhelming fear. We got to get out of here. There's a shooter in here. Where is he at? I felt that all the way through service. I stayed. That was the day that you came up to me and said, "Hey, Dave, I've been praying about you that maybe you would be good for the Lewis County Gospel Mission to be a board member." And I was like, "Oh my God, that's what it was." The devil was trying to get me out of there because he did not want that to happen. And that, I'll bet you, is where some people, they're at that point too. The devil is trying to move them away from that life buoy, that safety net,
That continued
that
mission
that
that they have.
yes,
We think the mission is over is when we take off that uniform, but
there's so
th-
much more to
there
give.
there's a lot for us to give. Um, a lot of you lose your community once you get out of the military, and I would tell you a good church group. Um, I would for some of you maybe that's not your thing. I will say get involved with either a good veterans group or a good volunteer group, something like the Scouts, who they need that leadership and people who have a work ethic and a skill ethic and are going to teach them all those things just to be a better human being in general. Um, you, I feel honored just getting to talk with you because your class there were a lot of the folks that were in your class that I looked up to, and especially as a just a kid who traveled to a lot of different schools. I think by the time I got to you, you're probably like my seventh or eighth school I think
Mm,
I had
mm.
attended. So it was very nice having older classmen that, not saying all of them were great, you know who you are,
Yeah.
but even some of those I'm friends with now. So it's but I think you did an awesome job being not only not only a good leader in school, but I think you were an exceptional leader in adult life and a great leader at the mission. So thank you for your years of service for our country, but also in serving the Lord at the mission. There's a lot of people who got meals, who got clothing, uh, who got to hear the gospel because of the work you did and the efforts you took. And we we both know I've been out of the mission for a long time now, just between deployments and moving up north. But thank you so
Yeah.
much. Before I go, I'd really like you to tell us about life after retirement and how did you end up in your adventures now? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So after retirement, I took some time off. It was 22 years in the service. So I took some time off, um, and I applied for a job at Air Methods. They were an EMS company, the world's largest EMS company. I didn't know it at the time. They're like, well, how many hours you got? Oh, 7,000. How many night vision goggles you have? Oh, 3,500, 3,600, something like that. Instrument, IFE, all that kind of stuff. So it was like a no-brainer. I get on there, no, and the first assignment they gave me, they're like, okay, you're going to be the lead pilot. I'm like, I have never flown EMS in my life. How am I going to be the lead pilot? It's a brand new base. There's nobody here. You're opening it up with me. I didn't even
Wow.
have flights. I didn't even have the the
Flight suit.
flight suits that they had. I had to wear my old military ones.
Wow.
So I did that. Opened a base, and I treated it just like military. I'm like, this is nothing more than an inspection, and we're gonna. This is what we're gonna do to check the boxes. And I went with the crew, and we covered everything. I gave them classes. We smoked it. Became certified. I don't remember what certification it was. Too many years ago. Um, but you use your military background. You aren't. Don't just throw that away. Now I don't wear military on my sleeves. I don't belong to any veterans group. And in conversations, it really doesn't come up because I mean, it's not that I'm not proud of what I did. It's just that I'm on to something else, a new
A
adventure.
different chapter.
Yeah,
That's the
and as far as this goes, like I said, I didn't wear military on my sleeves. It's not open for everybody to see. However, hearing God say you need to be at the mission. As soon as I was at the mission, there were needs that had to be fulfilled because I was familiar with military. I was like, and with Boy Scouts at that time, I was like, why aren't we in the federal program to receive surplus items? Well, we were, but we didn't really do anything. None of them were military. We didn't really get anything, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. There's stuff that we could. Oh man, for next to nothing, and they'll give you stuff at 3% of original cost. So we would get sleeping systems for like $5. Those are, I don't know, hundreds of dollars to the military.
Yeah,
We'd get
try to pay $3 when you've lost one and trying to get through CIF. That's not going to happen.
yeah, yeah, a couple $100. So tents. We ended up getting kitchen equipment. We got all kinds of stuff. I was asking the guy, I'd really like to have a big signpost, something we could take in parades, something that we could haul, large donations of food with. If you ever get a truck in, I was actually looking for a tank or an aircraft or something. That we could, it'd be like, what the heck's a tank doing there? Oh, see a sign that says Lewis County Gospel Mission. Oh, needs of the month this week, eggs and coffee. Oh, I'll go to Safeway and get some eggs and coffee and bring it to the mission. That was my thought. They didn't like the thought of it being a signpost. They liked the thought of us being able to use it and haul stuff with. So 2 years of me badgering this guy, he comes up and he has 5 vehicles. I'm the first one on his list that he calls. I got 5 of them. They're first come, first serve. I was on the road up to Tumwater as fast as I could go. One of them had an electrical fire. I was like, okay, I don't want that one. Had a problem with the alternator. I drove all 5 vehicles, and this was my favorite. This one is called Malachi. Malachi translated is the Word of God. Or no, I'm sorry, the Messenger of God. Messenger of God. That's what Malachi means. So I got this truck, and we've picked up tons and tons of food with it, delivered it to the mission. But you can see the bed is really high. And it's been in many parades. Even got awards. I didn't even put in for anything. I got awards like the Princess Napawana's favorite.
Right on.
I was like, what? Wow.
But that's the thing here with our community. Yeah. Well, I'll say the Lewis County community. I'm in a different area now, but we have a very high volume of veterans and retired veterans that live here. I don't know if we're still like the top. I think some beat us by population now, but we were for a while one of the area with the most retired veterans in it.
Yeah.
And so I know just about anybody seeing this, especially uh, the old color scheme, that probably a lot of people perk up when they see this drive by.
I got very lucky being at the gospel mission. I was vice president, because vice president has no duties. You just get a skate. And I was brand new. I was vice president. Hey, we need a vice president. Oh, I guess I'll do that. I'm new here. Well, there was one time where the president was at elk camp, and I had to take over. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I ran the meeting because I was familiar with not only being a homeowners association president, knowing how meetings work, Robert's Rules of Orders, but I was also the standardization chair for the state of Nevada for my unit. So I knew how meetings worked. So I did the meeting. Well, as soon as he found out that I could do the meeting, he's like, okay, it's my turn to step down. I became president for the end of his term. Then I got reelected, or I got elected for the first time for a 2-year term, then elected the second time, so 4-year term. Then you had to step down. And I stepped down, and another guy took over for 4 years. Now I got reelected as president again. So during that time, I told the executive director, I'm gonna get a truck. I want a signpost. And she's like, freaking out about it. And I remember the day I showed up with this truck, there was gospel mission in massive letters across the dash. And you went out there and was like, oh, heck yeah, this is awesome. And our executive director, who was an older female, she was like, well, okay, maybe this might be all right. And then, then she talked to some other folks, and okay, it was good. But what
she was a great steward. She was afraid of
me taking advantage by getting this truck. So I got this truck for $3,500. But what I did is the mission actually got it. I gave the money to the mission to buy the truck, so it never cost the mission anything. And I told the mission, you'll never have to pay a dime to this. I'll put the fuel in, I'll do all the maintenance, I'll do everything for it, so it doesn't cost you anything. In return for that, they said, because they didn't want it on their insurance. I had to get $1 million insurance policy, by the way, for
Oh,
18 months.
wow.
It cost me $1.25 per mile that
Wow.
I drove this for that million. But she made me get that executive director because didn't want to have that risk.
Yeah.
So after 18 months, the deal is that the mission that's no longer, we are not. It is going to you. We don't want to have that liability. Plus, you're paying for all the stuff. So after that 18 months, it reverted to me, which I've used it for now 8 years, something like that, hauling food. Um,
Yeah.
but
That that is awesome.
yeah,
Now your project now, is that all right to share?
yeah, you can share that.
Would you let my
Yeah.
so when you get out and sometimes you're just not content with being retired or just, fishing every day that you can, or sometimes you just want to do something else. Would you let our audience know what you decided to do?
So, like many military folk, you have a heart to save. You have a heart to save something, and you don't want to see stuff, whatever it is, whether it be a plant that's sick, and you want to try to nurse it back to health, or you have a vehicle. Oh, it's 1226.
Oh,
You know what that means?
no.
Psalms 122:6. Pray for peace in Israel. So I set my alarm 1226 to pray for Israel. You can do that too. Set your alarms 1226, and you just say, Holy Father, I pray for peace in Jerusalem.
Amen.
Amen. Let me
Amen.
turn that silly thing off, and I'll answer your question.
Y'all didn't know you were going to get some great close-up time with me by myself. Yeah.
Okay. Set alarms on. Okay, so military folks like to save things. This was going to be going to the hot knife. It was going to be cut up, and there was only about 120 of these trucks ever made. It's an M920, which is different than it's a MET, medium equipment transport. So it was meant to be able to pull an M60 tank onto a flatbed trailer and be able to haul that M60 tank away. So it's big. It's 400 horsepower Cummins diesel, 1,100 foot-pounds of torque. I mean, it's a monster, and it was going to go to the hot knife if I didn't save it. I had the funds to save it. I went there looking for a 900 series 5-ton because I love the sound of that whistling turbo. It's like I
Yeah,
started
but
one of those up. It was just amazing. So anyway, I went there
oh,
looking for that. Saw something even bigger. It didn't have a door. Didn't have a dash. I had to find a full cab
oh, dang.
in Virginia, and $1,700 later just for shipping. I got a full cab, which is sitting up over there. So I was able to scavenge the door off of it, scavenge the dash out of it, and scavenge a few other parts. And now I'm cobbing this thing together. But I didn't want it. I didn't want that piece of history to be lost. Just like your channel here, you do not want parts of history to be lost. And people
That's
are
true.
getting older, longer in the tooth. No, tomorrow was not promised to anybody. It's that same mentality. I did not want this to be lost to time. And it's a rare truck.
So many soldiers, service folks in general serve, and sometimes their families never know, or only know that they did serve, never got to hear any of their story. Um, and I just, as we started losing more and more of our generation, I wanted people to hear your story. I wanted them to know why you served, and would you recommend it to your kids? Would you want your kids to serve? Would you do it again? I'm also of that part of, I'm glad that I did it. I'm glad that my wife and Sergeant Brown, a buddy of mine, convinced me to stay for my 20. But I don't care if you serve for 2 years
Mm-hmm.
or 30. Thank you for your service.
Absolutely.
It was. I appreciate everybody that put on that uniform. I appreciate the folks who wanted to and couldn't. Whether it was something like asthma or something. I met so many people in life
Yeah.
who smacked that mic. I'm probably sorry to anybody out there, but uh, anybody who wanted to put on that uniform and weren't able, I'm glad that we were able to for them. It just I think too many people's story are lost, and too many people who love what we did and represented, um, their story doesn't get told. And you and I weren't Ranger, Recon, SEALs, nothing of that sort, but we showed up every day, and I think tried to give the best to our soldiers, to our commands, and to be honorable men in our time. And I love this chapter in life, but definitely glad to have got to serve, and definitely glad to have got to serve
Yeah.
during the same time as you. I know you were. I know I normally have the Washington Guard on here. We have to give some props to the Nevada Guard today, but he is local, so I hope you don't hold that against him.
Yeah. I was actually, maybe I should say, I was ADSW, which is active duty special work. So my retirement is an active duty retirement. The only I have 2 good years. You're talking about this the other day in a video. I have 2 good years in the Mississippi National Guard, um, and then I hung it up there. But yeah, I mean, serving is not easy. And would I, when I first got out? Heck no, I didn't want my kids to be in the military. I'd gone through some pretty rough times. It was tough for a person like myself with my personality. Sorry, I touched my mic. With my personality and whatnot, it was tougher. However, I would join the Air Force. I joined the Air Force any day, and this is no offense to anybody that's in the Air Force. I'm not saying the Air Force is easy, but my son, who is a graduate of WSU civil engineering, when he can't get a job on the outside, I am really seriously looking at trying to convince him, you know, the Air Force is not only going to train you, they're not going to and get your certifications. You're constantly getting certifications. You can get out of that after 4 years, and you can go to work anywhere with all kinds of certifications. So if you're having trouble trying to get a job, there are things out there that are available to you. And I'm not saying you have to do it through the Marine Corps or the Army, but if you're a rough and tumble kind of person, hey, I felt
Absolutely.
like I was rough and tumble too. And to be honest, being a warrant officer was probably easier job than what most. Now as a W4, I was still mopping floors because there wasn't anybody else. I was cleaning bathrooms. There wasn't anybody else in that hangar. I
I,
was I was and you never feel like you're beneath that. You always remember where you came from. So we'll wash dishes at the gospel mission. You'll mop the floors at the gospel mission. Why? Because you know how to do it. Not because it's beneath you, but you know how to do it.
if mom and dad didn't teach you, the army did.
Yep.
It was, yep. Well, brother, again, thank you for your time. I'm gonna I'm gonna get out of your hair and give you back to your lovely bride.
All right.
And I appreciate this. And you're gonna have to come up to the big town of Seebeck at some point.
Okay. And the last thing I want to say to your audience, you guys be safe out there and you know who you are. And God bless.
God bless, brother.
That's how I always end my videos.
That's